Dissonance. Another beautiful clap, JT. Welcome back to Total Dissonance this week. We've got on a lovely guest called Gwydion to come and talk about the music of Eric Korngold. Why are we talking about Korngold today, Gwydion?
He's been my favourite composer since I was 14, and I just love his music.
You love the music, yeah.
Could we get a little bit of a background on you, a bit more about what you do? Because you're actually studying at college in the same year as us, I believe.
No.
I'm actually my third year as an
undergrad. You're in your third year, so you're younger but smarter.
Yes.
Okay, it's even worse for us.
Yeah, I'm studying composition at college and really enjoying it, and conducting as a second study.
And I will say that I've heard your pieces being performed once or twice, which is already a good sign at RCM. And they were fantastic. It doesn't happen often, you know.
Thank you.
So that's really wonderful. But yeah, we're going to delve into the world of Eric Korngold, which is going to be an interesting episode because people are aware of him, but people don't always know about his life, about his works, you know, and his inspirations. But could you tell us a little bit about why at 14 you decided to take him on as your sort of project, in a sense?
Well, I can actually remember when I first heard the name of Korngold. I was about 12, and it was the summer of 2015, and Nicola Benedetti had just given a performance of the violin concerto at the BBC Proms. We'd recorded that concert on our TV at home, but back then I wasn't that interested in exploring the music of composers whose names I didn't already know. So I watched the opening seconds of the violin concerto and I thought, no, I'll save this for another day. And then for some reason I can't really explain, 2 years later when I was about 14, I thought, the name came back to me, and I thought, well, I might do some research on this guy. And I looked him up and found he'd been such an extraordinary composer. He'd been an amazing child prodigy who'd had a ballet staged at the Vienna Court Opera when he was, 13, had written for some of the most eminent conductors and musicians of his time. We've got Arthur Schnabel, Karl Flesch, Arthur Nikisch, Felix von Weingartner, and so on and so forth. And he was basically made aware to composers like Gustav Mahler and Richard Strauss when he was still in his teens, even before then. There's a famous story that when Korngold, aged 9, played a piece he'd written to Gustav Mahler, who was in the room, Mahler proclaimed him a genius, which is
He played his piece, it was called Gold, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
But it wasn't just Mahler, it was Puccini as well, also thought that he was like a prodigy. So, I mean, that is about as good as it gets, really, for child prodigy, to have the likes of Strauss, Mahler, Puccini.
He was born sort of very late 1800s.
1897.
So grew up, obviously, in that sort of Fantasiekel time, but also with Schoenberg and Weber and Berg, etc., that second Viennese school around him. And it was in Vienna that he grew up, right?
Yes, his family moved to Vienna when he was, I think, about 2 years old.
Okay, yeah. But what I was going to ask was, did he take much inspiration in his music from that second Viennese school of composers, or where did he draw it from around him at that time?
I'm quite sure his musical language, I would say, derives more from, if it does deserve at all from the second Viennese school, it's from their earlier pieces when they were still kind of pushing tonality, still writing tonally in a way, but then very kind of richly chromatic. And what I find amazing about Korngold's early music is he not only managed to absorb this kind of incredibly rich harmonic language, musical language from composers like, I don't know, Richard Strauss, Mahler, early Schoenberg and so forth, he managed to kind of fuse it with his own personal identity as a composer. And if you listen to, from the opening of his Opus 1, Piano Trio, which he wrote when he was 12, you can sense kind of where it comes from, but at the same time, you're aware that this is already Korngold and it could be nobody else. And I'll also mention the influence of Alexander von Zemlinsky, another composer working in Fantasiekel Vienna at the time, who was actually Korngold's teacher for a couple of years.
Well,
yeah.
Wasn't it?
I know. Yeah, he wrote one of the worst clarinet trios of all time in the early stages. Actually, maybe it wasn't that bad.
Really, is there like a Guinness World Record for that, or like a classical music Hall of Fame for the worst?
There's not, and if I give it that label, it's definitely not true at all.
Like anything else on this podcast, anything that we say, it's actually not true at all.
We put Gwydion, so it's all true now.
So was his father? Was it Lucius?
Julius Korngold.
Korngold.
Yeah, he was a very eminent music critic. He was, I think, the successor to Eduard Hanslick, who was very much a champion of Brahms and kind of anti-Wagner and Liszt and so on and so forth. What's interesting is that Julius was not only enthusiastic about the music of Liszt and Wagner, he was also very enthusiastic about the music of Mahler as well. And if I'm correct in remembering, he and his son, at least, they went to the rehearsals and possibly the premiere in Munich of Mahler's Eighth Symphony. Yeah. And it was must have been an extraordinary occasion. But then, Julius had an interesting effect on his son's outputs, for better or for worse in a way, because if you listen, because there's a story of Korngold attending an early performance of Stravinsky's ballet Petrushka and being so excited by the piece, and he just stood up and applauded at the end, only to be almost physically restrained in his seat by one of his family. I'm not sure if that was his father, but
it was his father, and because his father was very damning of the Second Viennese School.
Yes.
And even like the later Strauss stuff, he absolutely slated him, which was pretty problematic for Korngold, because when he started working in Vienna, Strauss was one of his superiors. Yes. So it became quite an awkward relationship to be friends with somebody and to be in the employ of somebody who your father was absolutely slating on a weekly basis.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think that was part of it. I think part of why he was writing at the same time as Second Viennese School and yet didn't seem to take any inspiration from it in many ways was because his father basically prevented him from doing so.
They probably didn't want him to listen too much to that stuff.
Exactly.
As they would have.
It's quite a sort of strange, rebellious teenage phase.
Yeah, exactly.
Like to rebel is
most of us exactly take up cigarettes and drinking. This guy is like...
This guy occasionally listened to Schoenberg.
Logging on to find a second video.
When his dad had gone to bed.
Following around Webern, yeah, exactly. That's interesting. I did have a question, actually, about... because when I was doing a little bit of reading up about Korngold, and I mean very minimal preparation, I saw that people described him as having two different kind of personalities, one when he was back home in Europe and one when he moved to America. So could you explain a little bit, maybe, about how his music style changed, about how his life changed when he did go to New York, was it?
It may have been. He's definitely went to America in, I think it was 1934 originally, to help provide or arrange the music to Max Steiner's film of Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream. And what Korngold did with that score essentially was to take a number of pieces of the incidental music that Mendelssohn had written for the play and arrange them for the film.
Oh, interesting.
And his first original film score came, I think, the following year with Captain Blood, and which... Because Korngold himself was one of those figures who really established the sound, what we think of as the golden age of Hollywood, which is sound which they brought that kind of late 19th century, early 20th century like romantic style with a kind of very rich harmonic language, very rich orchestral style, and also kind of Korngold described his film scores as operas without singing, and so you can detect in some of the films that he wrote there are lots of themes, not only in symbolizing characters, but maybe symbolizing concepts or places and so on and so forth. But yeah, Korngold's style, if you look at the music he wrote before moving to America, it's kind of like it's almost, because with his fourth opera, Das Wunder der Helena, he's almost taken the chromaticism of his musical language as far as it will go. But there are
before becoming atonal.
Not quite. It didn't really become atonal as a composer. He never kind of lost touch with tonality. Yeah. If you listen to some of the pieces he wrote before going to America, which I believe include things like the second string quartet, it's quite, I don't know, it's kind of on this cusp where Korngold may have begun to seem, musically speaking, a little old-fashioned. But then when he came back from America and went to Europe in the late 40s, he was definitely considered passé by that point. And the musical style is kind of touched by his experiences in America, not only by necessarily how the music sounds, but also the fact that he used themes from his film scores in pieces like, I don't know, the third string quartet, the violin concerto, the symphony in F sharp. The cello concerto, interestingly, was originally written as a kind of piece in itself for a film score.
With really just cello in front and orchestra. That's a strange,
for a film called Devotion, and then Korngold expanded it later into a single movement piece.
Yeah.
But it's...
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like his film music is like if you keep adding sugar to romantic orchestral music.
And it just becomes this
and
kind of wash.
It's like maybe a only like a spoonful of sugar away from frozen.
Yeah.
It's where it sort of feels like it's gone.
Just like sickly. No, well, not sickly, but yeah.
But almost. But I think that's why that when he then came back to Europe and started writing, and the critics started hating him, because they just sort of thought that he'd been like just defiled by Hollywood.
Yeah.
Like they just didn't take anything he did seriously, or thought that it was all. I mean, I remember his violin concerto got like damning reviews when High Fits premiered it, didn't it?
There was one review from, I think, Irving Colding, or the critic of the New York Sun, which is probably the only thing he ever did that claims immortality for him. The quip, "More corn than gold."
More corn than gold. That's the title of this podcast episode.
Yeah. That's brilliant. Actually, James, get on the poster.
Interestingly enough, fun fact about the violin concerto. Last year, during the summer of 2022, I was in the National Youth Orchestra of Wales, and we did the violin concerto with Jennifer Pike as soloist. And
wow.
Usually I end playing cello in orchestras, but this time I got offered the job of doing the Celesta in the Korngold violin concerto, and it was
cool.
really fun.
Yeah.
It's a really cool part.
How did you get offered that?
Just a few weeks.
Well, from cello as well, yeah.
No, it's I played cello and everything else in the programme, which was a piece by Danny Howard, Argentum, and Rimsky-Korsakov Scheherazade. But then a couple of weeks before the residency was due to begin, Matthew Jones, one of the main people running National Youth Arts Wales, he asked me, we're going to try and do something a little different. Instead of hiring somebody specifically to play the Celesta, we thought of asking a member of the orchestra to try and do it. Would you like to have a go? And I said, sure. And I ended up doing it. It was really fun.
That sounds like a good day out.
Yeah, that does actually.
Cello and the rest of
just
it.
end up behind the Celesta, just doing whatever, having a brilliant time. One of your favourite
Just doing
pieces.
what, sorry?
Having a brilliant time.
I saw you do this.
Oh, wait.
Moving on. Moving on.
Classical musicians over here.
Classical musicians over here. I wanted to ask a question. How do you think? I mean, obviously, Korngold was Jewish, and partly why he left for America was to escape the Anschluss.
He did. There's a story that's when Korngold was initially asked to score The Adventures of Robin Hood in around 1938, a call came from Helena Tinich, the wife of theatre director Max Reinhardt. Korngold's wife answered, and she told her that it was all over, in that the Anschluss had basically happened by that point. And almost exactly after the call had finished, some people working for Warner Brothers, which is for whom Korngold scored his films, came to the door and said, Korngold, you have to score this film. And he eventually agreed to do so. And if he hadn't moved to America to basically write the film score for this film, he might have perished. Yeah.
Well, because he travelled pretty liberally between America and Austria during the 30s. But obviously, had he been in Austria at the time when the Nazis took control, he would not have been allowed to leave. He very possibly would have been killed.
Yeah, put in the context.
And even then, beyond that, like his music's just stopped being played. I know he got pretty unlucky with one of his. Was it his last opera?
Die Catherine.
Die Catherine, yeah. And it was originally written about. Was it a French girl? No, it was a
Swiss.
I think it was originally an Austrian girl falling in love with a French soldier. No, a German soldier. No, French. It was something, you could search it up, but I think it's something like a French girl falling in love with a German soldier or something, and it had to be changed, being away from like a German soldier.
Yeah.
And it basically just got really unlucky because it was quite a good piece, but it just didn't get performed because it got censored by the Nazi regime.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. It's crazy because I can't think of many composers, even in a sort of later 1900s when films are, very apparent everywhere, that have balanced that. They've struck that balance perfectly between writing concert music, film music, and even opera. So how do you think he was able to do that? Like enter those pathways in his mind, kind of, and make it also appropriate for the task at hand.
To kind of write in all the genres that he did, in a way.
Exactly, yeah. Could have said that.
Trying to think of how to answer. I think. I'm not sure.
I mean, I would say from a sort of just a listener's perspective, he was very good at function music, which was something that was becoming more and more prominent.
Yeah.
And it's just like, can you turn your hand to stuff? It's something that I think modern composers are fantastic at. I think you're fantastic at it. I've heard a lot of your stuff, and it seems like it comes from a million different styles. And actually, at that time, if you listen to Schoenberg and Berg and stuff, they were trying to forge their own style. But Korngold, whilst having his own style, he was also very good at mimicking and writing in the style of other people. So I remember I couldn't believe when I was listening to his operettas, and then I listened to his film music, and then I listened to his symphonies, and you're just like, how is these all written by the same person?
That's true. And also, on that note, there's a set of 4 small piano pieces called 4 Little Caricatures, which weren't actually published at the time, because Korngold's publishers, Schott, also happened to be the publishers of some of the of at least one of the composers depicted in the caricatures. Apparently composers like, I think it was Schoenberg, maybe Hindemith and Bartok, I don't know, some people like that. And but you can also tell that every single one of them is Korngold, which is it's a remarkable thing.
Oh, I see what you mean. Well, he kind of tapped into the writing style of all of them.
Yeah, almost just like affectionately taking the mickey out of them in a way.
Yeah, that's so funny.
I like it.
So why do you think that people don't know him as well as perhaps we could?
Partly because, and this may be something people have said before, but maybe, I'm not quite sure, maybe the fact that, as you mentioned before, that once he came back from America after the Second World War, people thought he might have been kind of musically defiled by Hollywood. But then it was from the early 70s onwards, some recordings, beginning with his film scores, were released, and they kind of gradually reintroduced Korngold's music into the public consciousness, as it were. And certainly from the late 80s onwards, his concert music began being played again. And in the 90s, I think awareness had almost exploded in a way, because if you look in the late 90s, 2 biographies appeared almost simultaneously by Jessica Dutchin, I think, and Brendan G. Carroll, and I've read both of those multiple times. And it's by that point, I think Korngold was beginning to be kind of reaccepted into... and also by today, his music is being performed more often. I mean, you got a couple of years back in 2019, John Wilson and the Symphony of London's inaugural recording together was of 3 of Korngold's later orchestral pieces, including the Symphony in F sharp, which is not only a stunning piece, but a stunning recording too. And it I don't know.
Yeah, but these pieces are fantastic. Why is it then that when I see Korngold on a program, see only the violin concerto over and over again? I mean, it's obviously an amazing piece, but why does it make such a spark, in a sense, in people's minds, and not the cello concerto or the symphony in F sharp minor? Did you say?
Well,
why don't they catch on?
I guess, well, partly because quite a lot of his music is really difficult to perform, especially the symphony in F sharp. Then some of the violin concerto, it's probably one of Korngold's more immediately approachable pieces in terms of the language he writes in. But I'm quite sure the violin concerto is more often played. It's a wonderful vehicle for the soloist, and I don't know. It
shows a lot of virtuosity in it, doesn't it?
I've
seen some acrobatics going on.
And it's the same with his operas. His operas are unbelievably difficult.
Oh, they're really hard.
Oh, yeah, to sing. Yeah. I mean, Die Torte Stadt, which is... No. I could probably
do it right now.
Right now. Oh, I couldn't do it.
So those of you that don't know, Tom has been violently ill recently, and his voice, if you can't hear, is taking a hit.
I haven't transitioned to being a baritone just yet.
But he's getting there.
This might be the start of the journey.
Mate, I thought your balls had finally dropped.
Oh, yeah. Excellent. No. Here we go. The weekly ribbing. This is what I got out of bed
Sorry, the weekly what?
The ribbing.
Ribbing? Oh, ribbing.
Oh, beep it, James. Beep it.
James, don't you dare touch any of that audio file, man. That's going straight to me. Edge off it now.
No, the part of it is that it's written in a very Wagnerian style, and Wagner being like the most epic of any opera. So it's like all the voices that sing these roles are basically expected to be like Helden, like dramatic voices.
Yeah.
And there aren't many of those, and also there aren't many of those that sound nice. You know, Helden singers. It's like the hardest voice type to sing. It's like
what does that mean? Like heroes? Sort of,
it's like very sort of like heroic roles, and it's basically being able to sing over a full Wagnerian orchestra.
That's quite a lot of opera roles, isn't it? Like big fat guy walks on, just blasts a few tones out there.
I mean, I don't think it is. It's pretty exclusive to German repertoire. And
German
this
repertoire.
is part of it, is that because he wrote with a lot of the lyricism of Puccini in his music, and yet wrote in a very Germanic operatic style.
Yeah.
Like, you're asking a singer to basically do two very different things at the same time. And it's so difficult to do.
Okay, I see. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's probably the main reason why his operas aren't.
So they don't put them
mainly
on just
performed.
because they're a bit hard.
I mean, but interestingly enough, you mentioned Die Tote Stadt. A couple of months ago, back in March, I think it was, I went to see Eno's production of it, and it was really good.
Yeah, really.
It was a great production.
I should have gone to see that. I must admit, I've never
Gone to the opera?
I've never gone to the opera. No, it was a really good one, Ed. No, I've never gone. I'm pretty picky with what I go and see. Actually, and I shouldn't be, because I recently went to watch Jephthah at Covent Garden. Have you gone and seen it?
As of recording this, no, I haven't.
As of recording this, go and watch it.
should
It's
see it.
unbelievable. It's the first time I've ever enjoyed a Handel opera. It's probably one of the first times I've ever enjoyed Handel.
And because of the choreography and staging, or just because of the music itself?
All of it. I mean, the way they sang it, the staging, everything. It's just phenomenal. And it's like 3 hours long, and I only nearly fell asleep like 3 times.
Mate, you loved it. You loved
I
it.
did. That means it's good. I mean,
Yeah.
usually Ed's waking me up at the interval and sort of coaxing me with ice cream back in for the second half.
Yeah, coming in with like jelly beans and all the snacks. isn't it?
But no, I should go and watch it. I've listened to Die Tote Stadt a lot, and it's awesome.
It is a great opera, yes.
It's a great opera, but it's like more than that. It's like it's a great story, and that's something that you don't always get with opera.
That's true.
So, could you tell us then perhaps a little bit more about, this is such a vague question, but just so we've got a section on the podcast about Korngold's personal life, maybe, you know?
Yes.
His eyes lit up. We're onto something here.
Yeah, there was as rather interesting. You mentioned the Korngold and the Second Viennese School earlier, because when he was a teenager, I think one of his girlfriends, or a relative of one of his girlfriends, later became Arnold Schoenberg's second wife.
Wow.
But
She really had a thing for musicians, didn't she?
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, to be serious, Korngold met his wife Louise von Sonnetal, also known as Luzi, in I think it was probably the late 1910s, and they had a very loving relationship. They married in I think 1924,
Yeah.
around then, and they stayed married until Korngold died, and she outlived him by about 8 years. And yeah, despite parental opposition, especially from the side of Korngold's father, they enjoyed very happy life together. And
This father dude sounds a bit miserable.
This guy sounds like so
Just-
pissed off the
like,
whole
you've got to
time.
listen to this music and you can't marry this girl. Imagine.
Yeah, exactly. This father guy.
This guy.
I know, one noob.
it
What
was-
did he do? Like,
He was the villain of this
he
whole
was actually
story.
the villain, yeah. But the fathers often are in these kind of cases, aren't they?
Well, I mean,
that's why
it's-
they turn a bit crazy. Like, look at Mozart's dad. Got a
Oh,
good few
and
glory years. from,
Beethoven's
like 9
was
to
the
12.
worst.
Beethoven's dad was worse. Was he?
Oh, yeah, the worst. Because he was trying to make his son the next Mozart.
Oh, yeah.
That was it. I mean, he basically forced Beethoven to practice the piano. He like locked him in the
Yeah,
room.
yeah.
bullied
But-
music into him.
Exactly, I know.
Yeah, just how we all learned.
I probably would have
No,
done, I
sorry.
probably would have done better with a bit of bullying myself.
But yeah, no, his father had a lot of influence over the younger years. I mean, of course he did. I mean, he was a musician and his son was a music genius. And
Yes.
it's one of those situations where you sort of think that you know what's best for them.
Yeah, indeed. But then, yeah, there was an interesting thing that happened around the time that Korngold's opera Das Wunder der Helliane was going to be premiered, and it was seen as almost a rival to a very popular new work called Johnny Spielt Auf by Ernst Krenek,
Yes.
which is quite stylistically different, influenced by jazz and so on and so forth. And there was a campaign, like a two-way campaign in the press, those who argued for the Krenek and against the Korngold, and those who argued for the Korngold against the Krenek. And Julius Korngold really got embroiled in this, and it was, I don't know, it's just, he really didn't like Krenek's piece. And
but again, because it was very modern in style.
that's true.
which wasn't his
And
thing.
maybe I know some accused Krenek of being, no, not accused Krenek, accused Julius Korngold of being, I don't know, biased against Krenek because the
Yeah.
other opera being campaigned for was by his own son. And what's another interesting coincidence, historical coincidence, is that I think on the same day or the day after Helliane received its premiere, was that because this seems to mark, I don't know, not quite the beginning of the decline of Korngold's reputation in Vienna. I don't think it's quite that. But then the day after, or around the exact same time, the jazz singer, the first movie with sound, received its premiere. And so this is an interesting, almost ironic timing, the fact that artwork received its premiere after Korngold's opera. And interestingly enough, it was in that other art form, writing for that other art form, that Korngold was probably I don't know,
Yeah. I absolutely know what you mean. It's interesting what that. So the other opera by
Krenek.
That one being very different in style. Mm-hmm. His father, Korngold's father, actually being Jewish, hired out part of a Nazi newspaper to write a review of how bad that was. That's how embroiled into it he got.
No, and they were a Jewish family, obviously.
As a Jewish family, because he felt so passionately about how bad this other opera was. And I think that's partly why people saw him and thought this is the favoritism side of it.
Yeah.
And that kind of ruined his career. I mean, because I think Korngold's family came out to America with him during the war. Yes. And then his father ended up dying in 1945 or something. Yeah. Literally, like, as soon as the war finished, but I don't think his reputation ever really recovered from those accusations of bias and favoritism.
Oh, unbelievable, yeah.
But yes.
Incredible, yeah.
Super, okay, so on a more light-hearted tone or something, how about you tell us 3 pieces that people won't know but that you love, and a little bit of a backstory on them, maybe, or just one piece, or just
by
2
Korngold,
pieces.
I presume.
However many pieces you want.
Okay.
By Korngold, yeah. No, actually. Curveball.
Okay. I haven't actually listened to every single one of his pieces. I've listened to a great deal of them, so I'm going to list...
Oh, no, get this guy off the podcast. He hasn't listened to every one of the pieces.
Okay, in all seriousness. One I'm thinking of right now is the string sextet, which he kind of began composing during the First World War, and which received its premiere in 1917, just before he turned 20. And it's just so well written. And interesting that the way he writes his chamber music, he writes so richly for the instruments, you almost think he's thinking orchestrally, but it also works so well. And the music of the string sextet is just so... I don't know, it's just open and sunny. And the second movement seems to be a kind of taking forward the musical language of Schoenberg's Verklärte Nacht.
Right.
Even further into almost chromaticism, but it's entirely Korngold. The third movement is magical. So the intermezzo is wonderful. And the whole thing is fantastic. With the... I'm trying to think of one of the operas. One of the operas I really love is... Violanta.
Yeah, that's his second opera.
The second opera, yes. And this was described by his biographer Brendan Carroll as the work which Korngold kind of makes his transition from child prodigy or Wunderadolescent into a fully mature adult composer. And you can hear how... It's not to say that his early music was immature in any way, but the tone of the music suddenly changes and kind of intense, frequently kind of erotic music in this opera, and it is fantastically written. And
I don't know if you've ever listened to it as part of the double bill during...
There's Polycrates.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I haven't.
It's because it's weird. It is part of that double bill. It's strange. I haven't watched it live, of course, but I've listened to them back to back, and one is like basically a very funny comedy written by much more obviously a teenager.
Yes.
And then you have Violanta, which is like night and day.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I would love to see those operas, or maybe conduct them one day. Who knows?
Yeah. Who knows? The RCM might be doing it next year.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of doing one term's preparation,
that would be ambitious.
One whole year.
That would be ambitious though, because it's very hard writing, and you probably need lots of instruments.
Yeah, They also won't be doing it next year, but we will write letters until they do.
Yeah, exactly.
Gwydion and I will be.
With like a total dissonance wax stamp on it.
Yeah. You can really
like
get that.
Pitchforks, you know.
Absolutely, we can really campaign it.
Then it's third piece. Trying to think of something from later in the career, because I've picked 2 pieces which he wrote when he was a teenager.
Go for some film music.
Film music?
Yeah. One of the scores.
To confess, I've only had like excerpts from some of the film scores, but out of the ones I've heard, it's hard. It's really damn hard to choose.
Anything from Robin Hood?
Oh, the Robin Hood score is fantastic. I think Robin Hood is probably... I'll choose Robin Hood.
Yeah.
Not only because it's an amazing score that, in the act of writing it, probably saved Korngold's life, but one of the pieces from which Korngold took inspiration was a symphonic overture he'd written called Sursum Corda, which had been premiered in Vienna in 1920 and which has been provided Korngold with quite a significant flop after many successes. But ironically, he used that music in the score to Robin Hood, and the score to Robin Hood won him his second Oscar.
Yeah, wow. That says it already, doesn't it? It's kind of because people won't have watched that Robin Hood because that was like 1939 or something.
38, I think.
38. Sorry.
It's okay.
Sorry, Ed. People will have watched the later Robin Hood from the 90s, weren't they, with Michael Kamen writing the music.
Yes.
But it's only when you listen to the music of Michael Kamen that you realise quite how much he paid homage to Korngold in his score.
Yeah,
it's very similar.
Instead of paying homage to Korngold, I mean, you've got famous example from the title music the Korngold wrote for the 1942 film King's Row was, I think, one of the tracks that George Lucas invited John Williams to take inspiration from the music for Star Wars. And if you listen to the beginning of King's Row, it's ba 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 ba, and then the beginning of Star Wars ba 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 ba.
Yeah.
It speaks for itself.
Pretty similar.
We also know that John Williams copied and pasted everything.
John Williams, he did it in Tintin as well. So
Bro, you kind of look like Tintin, actually.
That's just the most unnecessary thing I've ever heard in my life. I'm going to demand a written apology later off camera.
Total dissonance stamp.
But no, John Williams. You can definitely hear a lot of Korngold in his Tintin score from 2011 or whatever it was.
Okay, I think it's 2011.
I don't know. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, fair enough. Keep going.
Absolutely. Oh, this is when the real gold comes out, isn't it?
What about Korn?
What about Korn? Oh, here we go. No, don't clap it. Don't encourage it. Don't encourage him. He's getting braver. We need to put his lead back on.
He's growing in power. Stop making that up as a surprise.
Encourage.
Okay.
Back in the box.
It's interesting being well, not me, but you being a composer. Mm-hmm. How much have you taken from Korngold in your own works? I mean, because every composer must have their every current modern day composer must look back into the past and have someone they go to as a staple. Mm-hmm. But you've chosen Korngold in many ways to learn from. And what have you taken from his musical style?
I'm not quite sure. I think certainly probably expanded my harmonic palette at the time. But then, in terms of influence, I'm not really sure how Korngold affected it. Maybe it's more subliminal in a way. But then, I can't really think of any one way that Korngold might have affected my music, because it's not speaking as a composer, not necessarily what you hear that's always the influence. In so many ways, it's also how it's made.
Yeah.
How the music has been written, from a technical point of view. And I do very much love Korngold's music, but as an inspiration for kind of writing my own music, I can't really think of anything right now, with the possible exception, when I was about 15 or so, I began kind of writing a string sextet, which I never completed. And the kind of opening of the piece is kind of, I don't know, it draws on the sound world of Korngold in a way, the Korngold sextet.
Right.
But not in the least because it's in the same key.
Intentionally? Did you do that?
Probably, I don't know. Yeah. But it's D major. But then I never got around the first minute or so, writing the piece. Then, yeah.
We must find it.
Let's find it. Yeah. Dust it off. No, but I guess to go back to that question about how he influenced you, what would you say his defining characteristics are? Korngold stuff.
Well, first of all, I think there's an amazing generosity in his music, not only in terms of the richness of his style, but the way he writes for whatever he's writing for, the voices or the instruments or whatever, is very involved with the music. And as I mentioned before, the chamber music, much of the chamber music feels like it's written very symphonically, very orchestrally almost. But that's part of what makes it so appealing to me. I remember hearing of the Junior Royal Northern College of Music in Manchester a couple of years back, there was one group which had learnt the first movement of the piano quintet, which is a really hard piece.
Okay.
But which, when performed, it's just amazing. Then other feature of Korngold is that, I don't know, oh God.
It's difficult to put into words.
Yeah.
It's difficult to put into words. Initially, when I fell in love with this music, it was partly due to the fact that I thought, I can't believe a teenager or a preteen wrote this assured and this
Masterpiece,
kind of music.
But it's also how sophisticated it is.
Exactly,
for a
kind of
teenager to have
how
written.
he not only absorbed the kind of styles of other composers at the time, but also managed to forge his own identity as a composer. And
I think it's interesting. A lot of what was spoken about in Hollywood when he became popular out there was that the reason this guy's so good is because, and this is a very American thing, I think, but they were like, he's so good at getting the emotion of the music across. Like, this is why he's the best film composer ever. Whatever, that's what they were saying in America when he started off.
way they discovered music.
And yeah, exactly right. And it's like opera had been written for how many years before that?
Yeah.
And these like American film buffs were acting like Korngold is the first guy who was doing this. It's like the most American thing ever, isn't it? Really,
Yeah, no, it's
to be like, we
classic,
found this guy,
I know.
and he's like a genius because he makes music emotional.
It's so sad though, because like in America and from beginning of the 1900s onwards, I mean, Mahler went out there and they had they had a lot of interaction, with European composers and conductors coming out to premiere their operas, and show off their works. How many composers did they actually have themselves to show off? No one really. So, well, not so many. I don't think.
Not as many.
When I say early 1900s, I do mean like.
No, you've got Amy Beach. You've got, I don't know, Edward McDowell to an extent. Sorry?
I've played some Amy Beach.
Yeah.
I'm loving a piece
No, sure, but not Strauss and not Mahler level kind of music, or.
I mean, not as kind of, maybe not as internationally renowned as those composers, but I mean, doesn't necessarily mean their music isn't worth checking out.
No, absolutely.
For sure. No, it's I don't know. I always just sort of found that interesting that people that Hollywood was the kind of the death of Korngold. In many ways, it was the blessing and the curse. And I think because he was paid the most extortionate salary by them. He was basically, I think it was on like equivalent of what's like $500,000 a year.
Film music, ladies and gentlemen.
And he
given
only had to write like 2 scores a year.
Yeah, he was also given the choice of what scores he could write. I
Yeah,
think. And
which
so-
is a luxury that not like barely any of the other composers at that time had that choice, and he was able to keep the rights to his music, which a lot of people weren't.
It's amazing he wrote anything. Like,
Yeah.
after the first salary, I'd be like,
That's crazy,
Yeah.
And I think that's why there's a sort of always a hint of jealousy back in Europe.
Yeah.
But he was kind of forced into that position. He had to emigrate away from Austria.
Yeah.
He didn't really have the choice. He didn't really have. It's not like he could have stayed and carried on writing music. He would have been censored. He would have been silenced, and he possibly would have been executed.
Yeah.
True.
So, how would you like compare his film writing style to other composers of like sort of similar era, like Bernard Herrmann? He was around that time as well, right?
I've wanted to get more versatile in terms of my familiarity with these composers. I think Korngold's brought this extraordinary background in concert music for the stage, and so on and so forth. And he drew on the richness of his experience with that, as I think I mentioned before, with kind of how he structured his operas with kind of interconnecting themes that kind of wove the music around the drama, complemented the drama. I think he brought that experience to film music. And I remember listening to an interview that John Wilson gave on the Presto Music podcast that Korngold's music is almost aristocratic in the involvement it has with what's happening on screen, what we're seeing. And it's...
Yeah.
Sorry.
No.
Yeah,
As you
stylistic-
say, I can sort of
I think-
I can picture what you're saying. Anyways.
He also... What's interesting is that the influence from Vienna kind of seeped into some of his music, because there's a film from 1939, I think, called Juarez, that he wrote set in, I think it's set in Mexico.
Yeah.
And Korngold was delighted to find that 19th century Mexico, at the time where the film is set, was very enthusiastic about waltzes of Johann Strauss the Younger.
Right. Yeah.
And so included that influence in the score. And
Do you think that was maybe as a protest against the Nazis? I mean, because it became very typical at that time when around 1939, where suddenly Austrian music was everybody was trying to really champion it to show how different it was to German music.
Well, I don't know, maybe so.
Sorry, I've just completely
okay.
off
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, no, interesting. Okay.
I mean, it's very. I mean, I'm getting all my reference here from The Sound of Music. Perfect film.
Yeah.
But very much there was a huge sense of national pride there around that period where everybody was saying, no, we're not German, we're Austrian.
Yeah.
And it was when the Nazi flags were being flown everywhere and everybody was very proudly still flying their Austrian flags.
Yeah,
I say everywhere. I mean, this is like I'm talking about the Von Trapp family here. You know, this is my source knowledge for this subject. Ed's quite used to this on this podcast of people say things and then I reference some niche film that only I've watched.
Yeah, exactly. And he keeps talking about it. And the guest and I
and the guest is like,
okay.
thinking that I've like read something historical here, and I'm just like, like last episode we were talking about Blackadder, and this episode we're talking about The Sound of Music.
Yeah,
not niche.
No. Blackadder's not really niche.
Neither's The Sound of Music.
Oh yeah. Have either of you or I seen The Sound of Music or Blackadder out of interest?
The Sound of Music, yes. Blackadder, probably not. I've only am familiar with I think like one meme from Blackadder.
Which one?
There's I'm leaving for Nepal where I tend to live as a goat. Something like that.
Oh yeah, classic. So this basically a lot of the premise of his fourth season, Blackadder's fourth season, which is set in the trenches, was like him trying to get away from fighting, right? And he kept coming up with like all of these stupid reasons as to why. So there's like I think it was like the first episode, he set himself up as a cook and cooked rat au vin, which he then pointed out was rat run over by a van. That's like, I mean, it's classic. And he found all of these like excuses not to. The final scene is him basically going over the edge and just getting like massacred, basically.
Yeah. I sometimes find that in my takeaway boxes there. I wonder.
Yeah. It's not a popular one on Deliveroo. But he, like a lot of his, and I think another one was where he pretended to have gone completely mad and stuck like pencils coming out of his ears and like underpants on his head, and I think maybe he said that quote
We just send him over
to
the
basically
trenches
try
even
and
faster.
like convince the general. And I mean, there were and he did all sorts of things.
Yeah,
He-
Blackadder was a genius series. I saw a few episodes because it was often what the history teacher put on when he could not be bothered to teach the actual class. Or we had like a deputy teacher in there, and they'd say and they'd ask what we were doing. We'd say, "Oh, we actually just got to last season." Blackadder. I think about what to keep going.
It's like, what are you studying at the moment?
Can't stop now. Exactly.
We're doing the First World War. We promise.
I love that old TV getting rolled out. Like really those tools.
You knew it was going to be a good day at school when it was film day.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
How
43 minutes.
done 43? I think let's call it there. I think there's a lot of food for thought in that.
Yeah, that's a nice length for an episode, and I think that there's a lot of sort of condensed knowledge that we've been able to include about Korngold.
Absolutely. So a huge thank you for Gwydion for coming on.
And
At such
depending on
short notice as
demand,
well.
a part 2 is always on the cards. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Thanks.
So can we let's finish the episode with Gwydion's 30-second pitch of why everybody should go and listen to Korngold today.
Yeah, Dragon's Den style.
30 seconds, off you go.
His music is, as I mentioned, amazingly generous in terms of what he gives to the musicians and so on and so forth. And I just found his music amazing. And without rambling, I can't really say much more. So
Yeah.
just go and listen to Korn.
There we
Go
go.
and listen to Korngold, and you won't regret it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Excellent news.
Okay.
Well then, thank you very much for listening, everybody, today. And we'll look
goodbye.
forward to seeing you next time.